Live. Welcome to another episode of the Rap Thought Podcast.
Not just another episode, but the 50th episode.
Wow. Happy 50th, not anniversary, but happy 50th.
Not an anniversary yet. That's in a couple months.
Yeah.
But still, 50 is a nice round number to get to. I like it.
It's a good number. Staying strong, doing the thing. Pandemic strong. How many episodes have we done before the pandemic?
It was maybe 4 or 5. It was early on.
I was going to say, my guess is going to be no more than 2 or 3.
Yeah.
But yeah, welcome to our 50th episode. We've been doing it since early February or so. Mm-hmm. Been doing the thing. So what we've been doing is we made a list, and then we add to it every now and then for some either albums, mostly albums that we were not too familiar with, some albums that we are familiar with, mostly artists that were like, hey, I've heard of this person but never heard their work, so it would be kind of cool to get to know them. And from that list, we do a randomized order, and we take a listen, and then we talk about it. And what we do, too, is we don't discuss it during the week that we're listening to it. We may shoot each other a text saying, like, hey, man, this lyric is out of control, but we're not giving anything.
Or this album is garbage, and I can't believe we're doing this, but I'm going to do it anyway.
I've said that. I have said that. So I've definitely bitched, but we saved the conversation for the podcast, and I think that's what makes.
But I think at the end of the week, whether we had a preconceived notion of the album, or we've never heard about it, or it's one of our favorites, we definitely come away having a different perspective at the end of the week. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? There were some albums, the first day or two of listening to it, I was like, man, how am I going to get through this? I don't want to listen to this. By the end of the week, I'm like, okay, I get it.
What were 2 albums you weren't feeling in the first couple of days?
I would say The Baby. Mm-hmm. That one was really hard for me to get through. Joyner Lucas. That was a tough one.
ADHD? Mm-hmm. Really?
It was after 2 listens of it, I didn't want to listen to it anymore. But after listening to it the whole week, I could understand it more, and I had a good perspective of it. And even though it's not my favorite album, I could still understand what Joyner was trying to do with it.
I feel that.
Yeah.
Okay. I think Shabazz Palaces was a little difficult for me, and I was like,
But when we recorded, you didn't sound, the way you talked about it didn't make the listener think that.
No, and I try to keep it that way. I don't, I think one of our good points, I think, is if we don't like it, we need to have a legit reason of not liking it. We can't just say, this restaurant, the food was good, the ambiance was nice, but I couldn't find a parking spot, so 2 stars.
Right.
You can't do that. But anyways, for this episode, we are doing Critical Beatdown by Ultramagetic MCS. So that group consists of Kool Keith, Sen-G, Mo Love, TR. Forgot that one.
Wow.
Forgot that one.
Yeah, but it's pretty much just Kool Keith and Sen-G. The other 2 that are on the cover are they're dancers, and they were part of Kool Keith and Sen-G were part of their dance group. Because back in the 80s, especially the early 80s, that was one of the biggest elements of hip hop was dancing and DJing and graffiti. MCing was kind of the last component or element to really catch in hip hop.
And what I had in my head, but I thought it was wrong, but it is TR Love. It's TR Love and Mo Love. So I was on it, but I second guessed myself.
Right.
But they formed up in 1984, and the album that we're doing, Critical Beatdown, dropped in 1988, which is a good year because
great year for hip hop.
Great year for life because we were born that year. That was a great year.
Yep.
So, but also a good year for hip hop too. I agree with that. So, they come from the Bronx, New York, and kind of what we've talked about here and there on the pod is definitely seeing, now that we've done a couple episodes and a couple artists, I'm personally getting the feel of what you hear about what each state or each region is known for. But then as you go through these episodes, it's kind of like, okay, like I'm definitely starting to see it. So here, like you definitely see more of that storytelling, a little bit more of that in-depth of what they're saying, whether they're trying to diss you and this very roundabout way of doing it.
Right.
So definitely more in depth.
Yeah, I have a question for you. When was the first time you heard of Kool Keith?
I mean, the thing with that is I probably heard his music, but I don't know. But I mean, I've heard Kool Keith.
But you've heard his name before.
I've heard his name. Oh, yeah. Of course.
So Kool Keith has been one of my favorite MCs since I was in middle school, maybe. Starting with Dr. Octagon, which is produced by Dan the Automator, who's also produced, a lot of other great hip hop albums like Deltron 3030, Gorillaz. He's done a lot of stuff. But the album he did with Kool Keith, Dr. Octagon, it's on the list, and I hope it comes up soon because I love that album. But
I listened to that a while back. I didn't realize Kool Keith was on that.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And Kool Keith, I've known Kool Keith from features as well. He was on the Prodigy album, The Fat of the Land. Not the Prodigy in hip hop, the Prodigy, the electronic group from England.
Oh, I was thinking Mobb Deep.
Yeah, so Kool Keith is on a song called Diesel Power. And the rhyming he does on that is very similar to his rhyming on this album. And he actually mentions Diesel Power in this album. And then he did a song with the Prodigy. You should listen to that song. It's dope. It's basically mixing this kind of rhyming with electronic bass beats. Which I was listening to the Prodigy when I was in elementary school. So I've known about Kool Keith for a long time. And Kool Keith, I think, is one of the pioneers of hip hop. He still puts out albums regularly. I think he's super dope. He has I think he has classic albums. Sex Style, I think, is a classic. Dr. Octagon is a classic for sure. So yeah, I think he's super influential, and I don't think enough people talk about him in hip hop currently. And I'm sure some of his other albums will pop up on the podcast in the future, so we can go over that more. But I had never listened to any of the Ultramagnietic stuff. Even though I was a huge fan of Kool Keith and I'd heard about Ultramag, I never got into it or got around to listening to it. And I'm not sure why, but I'm glad this album came up for the podcast because I was excited to listen to it.
I'm always interested and excited to listen to stuff that's older than, or as old as me, older than me, especially in hip hop, hearing some stuff that what is part of that foundational groundwork to what we're listening to today. Like it's always cool to go back in time and see where it all came from. So yeah, whenever you hear someone's influence, I feel like Kool Keith is always in someone's influence.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he like I said, he pioneered things. He pioneered probably the kind of horrorcore rap, which started on this album. Some of the songs he talks a lot about brains, and
it's a lot of brains, a lot of ears.
Yeah, it's a lot of weird stuff that no one else is rhyming about at that time, and they took a lot of flack for it, and they got a lot of negative press because of that, because it was weird and different. But today, there's countless hip hop artists that rap like that, and then later on you would have groups like the Gravediggers with RZA and Prince Paul, who it was all about horrorcore rap. And it was just about murdering and killing and that kind of violence and things like that. But Kool Keith definitely started that style of rapping.
So Matt, for your main thoughts that we always talk about at the end, what are some things that you're going to be, like when you read a paper and then there's like the synopsis kind of at the beginning, what kind of things are we going to be looking for from you when you talk about your thoughts at the end? What are you going to be pulling from this?
I'm going to be pulling it's a lot of battle raps. It's definitely calling out whack MCs while bigging yourself up as the better MC. It's a lot of, dope 808 beats from the 80s. It's going to be just talking shit to basically. It's an album of talking your shit from these guys in New York. And about rhyming. a lot of that kind of stuff. And I think what we have to keep in mind as we're going through this is 1988. Hip hop is still very young. It's less than 10 years old, or about 10 years old. So it's like we have to take our mind out of comparing this to current hip hop or what we normally listen to. Otherwise, we're gonna just be like, yeah, there's nothing going on in this album but talking shit.
That's a solid point. And like I would say, so I'll say mine. I agree with everything that you said. Of it's rhyming about how you're better than the next person, rhyming about the things that you'll do to this person metaphorically, and kind of the what is that term? Like the not you specifically, but you in general.
Yeah,
I am better than you, not anyone in particular.
Right.
And so for me, like my experience of listening to it is kind of like, okay, like it's a little old, but I think like you said, it's important to not compare it to what you grew up in and what you're surrounding yourself
exactly by. Because we have to remember when this came out, there's nothing else really like it. You know what I mean? They were definitely creating their own lane and trying something new in terms of even the beats. You know, we're definitely different from other artists at that time.
Yeah, so my experience like listening to it, I was fine with it, but it was actually when I was reading through the album. I got 15 tracks worth of just kind of transplanting the thesis of each track. It's interchangeable, all 15. So as we go through, and at the end, like I'll probably comment on that of like, this is why it was hard for me. But that's the thing that stuck out. And I would like to think I was pretty objective about it, of not comparing it to what I like, what I'm used to. But it was for me the same thing every single track. Right. So shall we?
Let's dig into it.
Let's do it. So this album is actually 47 minutes long. It's 15 tracks. There's a heads up. But the first track we have, number 1, is Watch Me Now. And Watch Me Now is kind of why you should have your eyes on us. Why we should have your attention. And I forget which other album it was. And I know we've done a couple 80s ones, but it's definitely you're putting your group on the map. And you're telling people, like, I'm better than the next group. This is who I am. This is who we are. Watch out for us. And this is definitely that first track, what you're getting from that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely one of those intro tracks that comes in with a lot of energy. The beat is pretty upbeat. There's a lot of dope, like, funk samples. And then, they're coming in with battle raps. And Kool Keith, he just has such a unique voice. And when he comes in, you definitely feel his energy, and his voice. I definitely resonate with his voice rather than Said G's. Said G's is dope. It's cool, but it's more normal. Whereas Kool Keith is a little bit more unique. Just the tone of it. And then I love Kool Keith's rhymes. He's just out of pocket. You know what I mean? He says weird shit that I think a lot of other MCs weren't saying. But he says, my rhyme shines and yours is dull like dirt. It hurt to be whacker, but instead I'll grab a big stack of whack MCs, lay them down like tile, scrapping garbage germs I'll pile. And it's talking shit in a creative way. It's like you said, using a lot of metaphors. And he's not literally grabbing a pile of MCs like they're and putting them in garbage. He's just talking shit, but. It's funny. I definitely on this album, I noticed certain words that they use that were probably prominent in their hip hop circles that no one says today, like calling, whack MCs germs.
Germs.
They say germ a lot in this album.
They throw ducks around quite a bit
They
too.
say ducks a lot,
and I don't know if it's like a half slang of lame duck and just calling everyone ducks. But that's another thing too. Is so throughout this album, did you count any cuss words?
That's interesting. I didn't really think about that. I didn't think about the cuss words.
I didn't get any. Did you get any type of derogatory statements?
No. Now that I think about it.
Yeah.
But it's funny because they are talking shit. Like they're pretty violent in their rhymes, but it's not derogatory, and they're not using, like you said, cuss words to do it.
Yeah, they're not cussing throughout this whole album, and I combed through it pretty good. I don't think they're cussing once. The most explicit thing they do is later on in the album. There are two things. It's like smack my girl like a pimp or something like that.
Yeah.
And then the other one was I can't remember. Oh yeah, it was referring to like something this girl and she'll swallow.
Yeah.
But that was like as bad as it got.
My guess is at that time in the late 80s, their goal was to be on the radio, and you couldn't get on it if you're cussing at all. There's no way that would happen.
That makes some sense. But yeah, and along with their rhymes, I really like everything you said about Cool Keith. I agree with. I also really like his flow as well too. Like I feel I haven't listened to any of his current material, but if he had that back in '88 and that and can build onto that until now, like I would be down to listen.
What's interesting is because I still listen to Cool Keith and I listen to his current stuff. It's actually pretty similar to how he's rhyming on this. Obviously, he changed it up a little bit depending on the beat and the song or whatever. But if you took the beat away and it was just the acapella of him rhyming and you put it next to an acapella from today, I don't think you could guess which one it was.
Oh, okay.
To be honest.
Yeah, I think I would have wanted to be a little bit more modern, but
right.
I like
it's a good and a bad thing. It's cool because it's retro and it's
consistent.
It's consistent.
It's what got the fans in the first place, so that's cool.
He's not like a Pharoah Monch or a Royce or something like that who's gonna constantly reinvent themselves. You know what I mean? Where you're gonna have different variations on their flow, and they're gonna constantly building on it. He is more of he's like Coca-Cola. Same thing day after day. You're gonna get what you get. It's not gonna change. You're gonna, it's gonna be the same no matter where you're at.
Yeah. And one more thing about his rhymes, I actually wrote down the same lyrics that you did, but I also added, every day when I come outside, you step back, stay inside your house. While you look out the window, your girl screams, where Cool Keith go? And just his flow and his rhymes are pretty cool. And it's so like to the point without having to cuss you out or anything.
Right.
That like, yeah, when I come outside, you go back in. Or like telling someone to sit down when they pee or something like that. Like it's not rude, but it's just like, yeah, man, that's a little disrespectful though. Like, so it's interesting.
So the next track is Ease Back. I love this beat. I think it might be one of my favorites on the album. And I love the scratching. And what's cool is that scratching noise that's, very, it's a signature sound of Public Enemy. The Bomb Squad who produced Public Enemy, they took that sound from Ultramagetic. From this song, basically. Like they took that idea and that sound and used it. So Ultramagnetic MCs definitely, they influenced a lot of other New York rappers and artists, which is cool to know. It's cool to go back and listen to what other artists were influenced by.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what we mean when we're looking at the foundational pieces of like modern hip hop or hip hop from a decade ago or whatever. These are the blocks and influences that we get those from. And it's really cool. What I liked about this track, what I really like about their style too, is that they stay on one topic throughout their entire verse. And so they may switch here and there, but it's not like modern hip hop where you say something, and then you may switch gears into something else for a couple bars, switch something else. Like they just stay on one point. Yeah. And so I don't have a particular lyric to support that, but it's just one thing I wanted to bring up. But one of the things I liked in this track too is like ease back is not just telling someone to ease back and whatever else. Like it's kind of divided, not necessarily divided into three parts, but the first one is like because of what he's doing, like, hey, I'm on fire right now, so you need to ease back, like just back off. And then the second one is, or like the last one I think it was, is, he's doing everything and he's having a good time with it. And he's like, I need to teach my son just how to ease back and have fun with it. And then the third verse is, I think it might be said G, I could be wrong, but they are basically rapping, and it's so second nature to them. It's just like, dude, I just ease back and I write these rhymes down.
Yeah.
Like it's basically being on a whole other level.
Yeah. One of my favorite lines from Cool Keith on this is dissing a mouse and smacking any gerbil. I bought a Saab in 1990 turbo, shining fog lights in the front. I'm by myself, no seats for a stunt. And I was just like, that's just cool lines. You know what I mean?
Cool.
It's cool imagery. And I love that he referenced a Saab. You know, we don't have Saabs anymore. But
yeah, they're pretty low key.
Those retro cars were dope back in the 90s. I could see those being like... But this is made in 1988. He's referencing... He's going to have the future car. You know, the 1990 Saab. That's going to be the next big thing. Like, he's already saying, I'm going to buy that.
Just like, man, like, probably just could see one of those rolling up the street falling apart.
Right.
So that's just funny to, like, compare it to newer times. But one of the rhymes I liked was, because I want it like that, I got it like that, have it like that, need it like that, it's better like that, I made it like that, I bought it like that, I'm living like that.
Yeah.
And just kind of just this, like, like, you're on top of your game and you have all this stuff and, like...
So that rhyme scheme, he does that on Diesel Power with Prodigy. I'll play this song after, but... He literally says those lines in the song. And I think that came out in 1993 or 4. So it was way after this. So it was cool that he took that and brought it back to life later on. Yeah, cool.
Yeah,
It's a dope song.
Cool. His flow is it's dope. And yeah, it was a cool song. I like the beat as well, too. It is probably my top ones for this album.
And with that said, I think we do need to mention that Said G produced all these songs, which is crazy.
It said on there like Ultramagnetic MCS and Said G.
Yeah, but he made all the beats. I'm sure Cool Keith might have helped with producing in terms of choosing helping choosing samples or whatever. But yeah, Said G made all the beats,
which is dope too, because for me at least, like there's modern day producers. Yeah, like it's almost like it's one or the other. I'm not convinced that Dr. Dre writes his own rhymes. But his beats are great. Kanye West, his rapping is a little, for me, like it's a little but his beats are amazing. So to me, it's always one or the other. It's not like one person that's proficient in all of it.
Who would you say is the best rapper / producer?
That's really hard. And I feel like we talked about that a couple pods ago. And like Black Milk is super cool. Royce is coming up, but like I feel like
Royce could take that crown.
Yeah,
if he keeps going up with his production, he could take that.
He could, and Eminem could be in that discussion too.
Eminem, I think we'd have to throw J. Cole in there. J. Cole produces a lot of his own stuff, and he's an amazing rapper. But you could go the other way too, where you could throw in an Alchemist, who's one of the top producers, maybe not the best rapper, but he can rap. He's a good rapper.
And MF Doom could be in that conversation
absolutely
too, right?
MF Doom. I think you could throw in Madlib. He can rap, and he's one of the top producers ever.
And Pete Rock should be in that discussion too.
Pete Rock.
So it's hard. It's really hard. You know, like if I were to critique Eminem, like sometimes the ideas behind what he's doing, I'm kind of like, what do you know, like the Slaughterhouse album was like, what was that kind of thing? But so it's
but he made a couple of the beats, but he executive produced, so he like stitched it all together and you know, not necessarily making the beats, but deciding which rapper goes on which song and
that's the part where I'm like, I don't know if I should consider all of that into the whole production scene or that's separate. Like if I need to look at each track individually from top to bottom and the lyrics to it and see how that fits, or am I looking at your entire project? So it's a tough question to really answer, but I mean those are some of the ones I'd throw out there, at least to argue for the discussion. But we're on Ego Trip and we're on track number 3.
MC's Ultra Remix.
Oh yeah, that is the rest of it. I was like, wait, what?
Yeah. But yeah, this is another really dope beat. I actually really love this. I made a note that I could listen to this instrumental all day. If I had the instrumental, I could just let this bump.
I wasn't feeling the beat that much. It was kind of I think if I were like in the early 90s and like I walked into this like underground place and this was going, I'd be like, yeah, this is a really cool ambiance. But like in terms of listening to it in my car or at home, like I'm not really trying to do that.
Gotcha.
But the thing I did on the contrary, I guess I could say, is for this song, I felt like this is where the lyrics began to peak a little bit in terms of their content, because I kind of saw it as like he's painting a picture of the needles hitting the wax and then combining the raps with the beat, and it's entering your ears, going through your head and doing all this stuff to you. He uses a lot of very big verbiage in his songs, so sometimes you're like, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Right. But I see what you're.
It's like rhyming to rhyme.
It's kind of rhyming to rhyme, but like it's enough to see like I see what you're trying to convey, but it didn't have to be done that way. Yeah. So there's ups and downs, but I guess I understood it, so I was all right with it. But I respect it, but it was still like
Yeah, I thought Kool Keith was spitting. He says, by the flame of the lyrics which cooks the human brain, providing overheating knowledge by means causing pain, like a migraine headache, your cells start to melt while the techniques spin the waxes on the felt. And I just think those are cool lines where, he's using some bigger words, and it's very wordy bars.
It's very wordy.
But the way he says it makes it really fun to listen to. And he is funny. The way he rhymes it, like what he says is pretty funny. He's not being super serious, but he's rapping with conviction, and he could be aggressive, but he's also saying shit that's so out of pocket and out of the realm of reality, but it's funny. You know what I mean? Like cooking brain, like his raps aren't going to cook your brain, but it's just funny imagery to put out there.
And he mentions that in a couple tracks later, and I think I wrote some stuff down for that. But I like how said G, like he refers to himself as the scientist that's just putting music together that's informative, but then also to exterminate all these pests, all these whack MCs, all these pests. Yeah. And from parts of the beginning till parts of the end, they're basically saying that other artists, they're just putting out these simplistic nursery rhymes, and there's no substance to it, to any of it, to captivate their listeners to learn anything from it. And I don't know, what did he say right here? Every basic style of writing, they have no elevation that an audience respects and gives them annotation. And that's kind of the what you guys are saying doesn't hold any ground. You're not growing us as listeners, and we're not learning anything from you. You're just talking.
Right. Yep.
So that's what I got out of that track.
So next we got Mo Love's theme.
And classic 80s, just giving love to the DJ.
Exactly. I love that. It's pretty rare that you see it nowadays on current hip hop, but it does happen. But I love when the rapper pays homage to the DJ, because without the DJ, there wouldn't be hip hop, and you wouldn't be able to rock a show and stuff like that. It's like they're the backbone. And today they don't get as much attention as they used to. Back then in the 80s, the DJ was the rock star. They were at the forefront. And it wasn't until, late 80s, 90s where the MC took over.
And he's telling it in a way that's very descriptive. It's not just saying like, hey, MC Matt, he's a cool dude and I like his lyric, what he puts down. But he's saying, peep his hand going back and forth, north with the fader, smooth, picking up spots where the needle can groove. And just like really just like talking about his craft and like making it sound very artistic, and that he has his own style to it. So you're like, okay, that sounds cool. And that's just a snippet of what he says. So there's the whole song, of course. But I thought that was pretty cool to like not give more context as to what makes him great.
So then next we go into Kool Keith Housing Things. And that was a pretty popular term back then, housing. You don't hear people say that anymore. But I feel like I've heard other hip hop songs talking about housing. I know Eric B. and Rakim have a song like that, I'm housing. I'm not exactly sure what it means, but I guess maybe if you're housing, I guess you're taking over, or you're destroying everyone around you. I don't know.
I could see that. I mean, I thought like if I'm thinking of housing things, like it's kind of in housekeeping, but I definitely agree with that one of, it's kind of, what's another term? Just kind of housing it.
Yeah.
Like
and this is a Kool Keith solo track. He goes for 3 verses, which I think pretty much all of these songs, or majority of them, have 3 verses from both Kool Keith and Said G, or one of them has 2, one of them has 3. Like, it's a lot of verses on each song. So it's a lot of lyrics being thrown at you. Hip hop songs today have 2 at the most.
Right. That's true. And I think that was another reason why it was hard to read, is because
it's a lot.
It's 3 verses, 16 bars a piece, and it's the same material every single track for 15 tracks. So it's like they're going to talk about heads in the song. They're going to talk about ducks in the song. They're going to talk about whatever. So.
And Kool Keith is going to talk about brains. He says, "Quickly, I'm going to rip your brain off, throw it down so the blood can drain off my hands while I wave to a fan." That's definitely the beginnings of horrorcore rap right there. And I guarantee you other MCs were not rhyming like that back then. He's on a different level. He's in his own world. Kool Keith he's definitely not weird. I don't know what the right term would be. Maybe kooky, or like just out of pocket in his rhyming and what he talks about it, especially in his later albums. He's out there. Like on the album Dr. Octagon, his character is a gynecologist from the planet Venus, and that's his character. And he talks about being half shark, half alligator, half man. And it's just this wild stuff that you don't get from anyone else. And I think that's why I love Kool Keith, because he is so different. And what's cool about listening to this album is I can see the beginnings of that, and the beginning of Kool Keith creating these different characters and taking on these different personas.
I won't say it yet, but again, this track was just him further saying why he's better than
right. He's just going off for 3 verses, talking shit.
Yeah, he's having a good time with it and everything. So it's cool. Number 6, we have Traveling at the Speed of Thought, and I actually. I want to say, before I go a little bit further, is this was not the typical ride for me, like we said with other albums, where emotionally or what they're talking about, it puts you on this roller coaster of ups and downs and beats taking you here, and there. But there was this like where I'm interested, and then I start to peak. But my peaks and my valleys, or I don't know if my highs and my lows of this ride was, okay, I've heard this, now I'm losing my attention span, but now they've switched it up slightly so that I'm kind of interested again. So with, what was it? Ego Trippin', and some of the description they did there that brought me back up. Or I was still going up because it was only the 3rd track in. Traveling at the Speed of Thought brought me back up from the low because it was some more metaphors that were actually kind of cool. And he's just kind of talking, like Traveling at the Speed of Thought, it's basically saying that their lyrics are reverbing around areas, going through your head, changing stuff, and it's making you think, but they're hitting you like instead of like, light traveling at the speed of whatever, like their thoughts are everything's hitting you at the speed of thought. And it's penetrating your brain and you're processing it. One of the lines is, as I take your mind off and onto the it auto-corrected to Ann's track. I'll roll with it. And onto Ann's track, to teach dogs how to act, respect me when I whip your brain, skip your brain and dip your brain. And also saying I'm like a bird when I'm pecking your skull. And that's basically the thoughts just like penetrating you and you're, I can't handle it.
Right.
So.
I like the song. I like the sound of it. I like the rock sample. And that was very much of the time. You had the Beastie Boys, you had Run DMC doing this sound with the rock, combining rock and hip hop. And I feel like Ultramag was just throwing their hat into that ring of, okay, we're gonna take a rock sample and put it with hip hop because that's how we get the population into the music. You know, we can pull a lot more people into it. But I thought they did it in a genuine way. It didn't sound too cheesy. So I think some of the Run DMC songs from the album we did were a little cheesy. You know, it was a little over the top. Whereas this, it definitely, it's different, like you said, from the rest of the album, but it fits and it doesn't sound out of place too much. It definitely grabs your attention because it is slightly different. You know, it's okay, we're going to go in this direction for a little bit just to bring you back in. You know, something like that.
Yeah, but is this like a slight, like... Yeah, I'm thinking of Space Mountain where...
Yeah, it's very slight.
It's awesome. Well, Space Mountain's awesome, though. But like this one where there's like a turn where it just jerks you off to the right and then you just go back to doing what you're doing. That's kind of what I thought with this track. And maybe a couple other ones. It's like this very linear ride and I get jerked to the side time to time.
So next, for number 7, we have Feeling It. Again, a little bit more of the same of calling MCs ducks and germs, more mentioning of brains. But it's a cool beat, and I think Said G, you know, he comes hard. You know, he definitely has more of the aggressive tone and more of the aggressive voice, and his lyrics may not be as attention-getting or as poignant as Cool Keith's, but they're definitely so dope. Like I don't mind listening to Said G. It's not like I wish this was a Cool Keith solo album.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I thought he held his own very well.
Yeah.
And there were tracks where he I wouldn't say outshined him, but he was like a step above Cool Keith. And I think that's cool because, I mean, there's a group that we did earlier where it's like, nah, this person definitely had it the entire time.
One thing I do need to mention on this song that I've discovered was that this is a slight diss to Slick Rick.
Feeling it?
Yeah. It says, I'll be sure I'm fresher, so tell me how I feel about you. Ducks, rack rappers around in town, never wearing boots. Toy Baileys, shaking suits, or sharkskin suits. With a story and through his auditory, Canal Street is my territory. Basically, Cool Keith is calling out Slick Rick for his simple storytelling and for wearing his sharkskin suits and stuff like that. And then, you know, Cool Keith is saying, you know, we're the better MCs. And, you know, I don't know where it started from, but that's what I read, that this was a diss to Slick Rick.
I didn't catch that. But, you know, Feeling It I got is like, hey, I'm feeling it. I'm now in my zone. I'm ready to tear people apart. And so what they're saying, their vibes, the beats, everything, to the point where they'll smack you through a glass wall if you're whack and act up. There was a line where he said something like smacking someone through a glass. But I think it was at this track that I realized that it's all the same formula, but then using it as like, hey, I'm feeling it, so I'm better than you when I'm in my zone. And my thoughts are traveling at the speed of thought. They're better than yours. Stay out of my way. I'm housing it. I'm housing things. Like I'm bodying you. I'm bodying you.
Right.
Same shit. It's the same thing. So I think around track 7, when I was reading the lyrics, I'm like, it started to click of like, okay, I'm starting to see this. When we transition to 1 minute less, it's the same thing as like this like countdown of like, hey, we got 1 minute. I forget how the intro goes, but basically saying like, hey, we have 1 minute to like critical, you know, meltdown or whatever else.
Right.
So we gotta
spit these rhymes real quick.
We gotta spit these rhymes and put these whack MCs in place.
And this is just, I'm pretty sure it's just Said G, is it?
Yeah, I think so.
And he's talking his shit on this. I thought it was a cool beat. It's one of the shorter tracks in the album. It's almost like an interlude. It's like 1 minute left. Let me get these rhymes off real quick, and then we'll get back to our program.
Yeah, it's 1 minute left to degrade these whack MCs until we go back and keep degrading these whack MCs. So
exactly,
that's what I got.
All right, so next we go into Ain't It Good to You?
Wrapping so much around your head that you kind of lose your mind to it. And it reminds one of my favorite plays by Steph Curry is I think it was back in like maybe 2011 or 12 or something, but he's playing against the Spurs.
Yeah.
And I forget his name. His last name is Neal. But he basically put him on skates. And just between the legs, Neal's over here, Curry's going over here, and just shoots the three. And like there were things going around of like, yeah, to this day, Neal is still looking for Curry kind of thing because he left him. But it kind of reminds me of that. Like this song is dissing people, but like teaching them at the same time. Like, okay, see how Curry put you on skates? Let's study those moves and let's try to prepare for the next time. That's kind of what my interpretation of this track was.
Yeah, I feel that. This wasn't my favorite. This is probably my least favorite beat on the album. I just didn't feel it at all. And they're both rapping a little bit faster to keep up with the beat. They have a little bit different flows on this.
I like the switch up to kind of show like, hey, we are a little versatile. So I respected that part.
But again, I really liked Kool Keith's lyrics where he's going somewhere else with them. He says, to the galaxy and leave your dome piece in the hemisphere. Now you're lost on Jupiter. Your brain revolves around you. You get stupider. He's bringing in space and physics. He's bringing other things into his rhyming.
Reminds me of like that old like thing that you say as a kid, like girls go to Venus to get a penis and boys go to Jupiter to get more stupider or some shit like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's just ironic. Like,
yeah, he's taking school rhymes and putting it into his whack MC rhymes.
Yeah, but then the last one, he's talking about like how people have like these simplistic nursery rhymes as well too, and it's like it's similar a little bit. I like some of Said G's lines. Or he says, I'm a wise man, prophet of the Bible. You want to try me, then I'm liable to go and flow and show. Don't you know Edgar Allan Poe could not write this mysteries with a twist.
That's dope.
Yeah, and I thought that was kind of cool, just going at people, just saying like, yeah, if you do this, I'm going to have to, I have no choice but to do this to you. So he's putting you on warning of if you're a whack MC, or continue with caution kind of thing. I don't know. I respect that much. But 9 tracks in though, I'm kind of like, all right.
Yeah, I did mention that as well. It's like, okay, this is where the album kind of starts to slow down for me, where I start to lose a little bit of focus. Because that 9 tracks of pure bars, 3 verses each song, it's a lot. And the songs are 3.5 to 4 minutes long. It's hard. It's hard to stay focused for that long.
And I think the focus part is that I'm not getting anything out of it because I'm not learning anything, but I'm also not being told anything that I haven't been told prior. But it's just the same thing. It'd be cool if you are going to go this deep into dissing people, like to actually make it aimed at particular people. But and I think another thing that would keep me more captivated is that if the rhymes are more entertaining. Yeah. So it's just like, I'm not laughing at any of this stuff. I'm like, oh, that's impressive, but I've already heard this. So like if any of these tracks, you can have any of these tracks on here, and if you were to subtract like 4 of them, then I think they would be fine. All of them are fine standing alone, but when they come back to back, that's when you're like, okay. Right. Funky remix.
I actually really like this beat. I like the funkiness to it, like it says in the title.
Did you hear any similarities in this track?
What do you mean? Like to another beat?
Yeah, like in the beginning,
Yeah, I did. I can't hear it in my head, but I remember being like, oh, I've heard this somewhere, or I've heard this being used in another place.
Yeah, it's a trip because, that tells me that's California Love right there.
Yes, right.
So I didn't look up to see what it was sampled from, but I got that kind of a feel. Right. And I should have looked that up, but one of the things that's cool about music, and we've talked about this in a while back, is, when it samples something, it's either a wake up to me like, hey, hip hop is known for sampling a lot of music, but it also tells you like, wow, this is actually older than I thought it was. So I don't know when California Love is from. But it's sampling something in 1988. It was being sampled. was either sampled or created. So
right.
it's like, okay, cool, that's old. That's
yeah.
dope.
Yeah, super dope. This is, even though with the previous track I was starting to lose attention, when this song comes on, I'm definitely, it perks me up a little bit. I'm like, okay, this is a really dope beat, and obviously there's dope rhymes in here. Even though, like you said, I'm not gaining much from the lyrics, I'm not getting much substance from it, but just listening to it, I'm like, oh, this is cool. I enjoy this. I'm not, hanging on to every bar and line and interested in what they're saying. It's just, as a whole, it's cool to listen to.
I'm gonna say this one because he's basically saying like there's a lot of I'm this and you're that. Mm-hmm. Some of them don't really make sense to me, but he's saying like he's the heat miser, you're Rudolph, he's steel, you're plastic, I'm rubber, I'm glue. He didn't say that part, but it makes me think of that. One of the rhymes was, but my rhymes correct you like a switch to a small mistake. I wax all of you and leave your ears to ache. You need Excedrin, Anacin, medicine, and then he goes on and says other things.
Right.
But I don't know, like if I'm trying to remember, we're in Christmas time, I should have rewatched it. But I mean, Heat Miser versus Rudolph, I don't really think that turned out too well for the Heat Miser. Because he got in a fight with his brother, I think. But it's just kind of an interesting rhyme to think about. I was curious what your thoughts were of like the comparing of like, hey, I'm steel and you're plastic, and you run into me and you get messed up, but I'm fine.
Yeah. I think it's cool imagery, and using, that kind of language to talk your shit and be like, yeah, like I am steel. You'll never beat me because you're plastic. You soft.
Yeah. Is another way of saying that.
So next we got to give the drummer some, and they're paying respects to the drummer, the beat maker, which is cool. This song actually does have a cuss word. It has change my pitch up, smack my bitch up like a pimp.
It did say bitch in there.
Yeah, for any rapper who attempt to wear troops. So when he says smack my bitch up, that was sampled for another song on the Prodigy album. That's called Smack My Bitch Up. And the chorus of the song uses it as a sample. So I didn't know that. I just found that out listening to this. I was like, oh, shit, that's where that came from.
Some more things to hurt your feelings are because you dirty, your rhymes are stink. Like garbage, I have to put you in a hefty, or instead, just let the whack MCs accumulate like dust. Take out my duster, shine them up, and teach them respect. And some rappers are hate. Oh, it's sorry. So there's that one. I thought that was interesting just because it's like, should I go after all of them at once, or should I let them accumulate and then take them all out at once, kind of thing. And it's like, okay, that's some skill if you're gonna go like 1 versus 100 and everything, right. And take them all down. So I was like, that's cool. One of the other ones I liked was probably put this in the episode description of some rappers are rating us, some are hating us, some are talking us, some are debating us. And I was like, all right, that's going in there somewhere. So
that's dope.
Yeah, but just,
he also mentions AIDS, which I was like, wow, that's for that time, that's kind of crazy. He says, if you're a germ filthy like AIDS, I'll clean you up the heat, vapor scrubbing and scrubbling, like a mistake on paper I'm rubbing. Said G using AIDS as a anyway, it was Said G who said that, and I was like, Said G using AIDS as a diss. That's pretty wild.
It kind of makes sense though, because I mean, it was a big thing in that time. Like it was huge, so it's kind of interesting.
But I don't think other MCs at the time were probably using AIDS as a diss.
No, but I mean, some were. There was one album we did, and they said that like kind of referring to someone who had AIDS as being dirty. And then the irony behind, Eazy-E dying. And so I wonder if that kind of toned it down a little bit.
Probably.
But, yeah. But you know what, Matt? After this track, I was actually kind of frustrated a little bit. I stopped taking notes. I stopped taking notes after that because it was just the same thing with a different title to each one.
Do you want me to fill you in on if they were talking about something different on Break North?
No, I mean, I can still keep going. It's not a problem. I just said, like, at that point, because I read the lyrics for the last ones, and I was like, Nothing's standing out, so I'm not writing anything down. So no, I'm good to go.
Yeah.
Just give you a heads up. Even if I didn't. How about this? For Break North, I'll just say they're going after weak MCs, and then they break north when they're done doing what they're doing, and they dissipate and go on.
Yeah.
Tell me if I'm wrong.
You're not wrong.
Okay.
But this is the song where they got into trouble with the press for some of Kool Keith's lyrics, where they actually were accused of being satanic and being cannibals.
Being cannibals?
Yeah. Well, listen. He says, I break domes and speak in the raw. I'm iller, a South Bronx killer. I chop rappers and throw them in the river. Tasting as I swallow your liver. Here's your brain for your girl, I can give her. So he's talking about killing someone, eating their liver, and then like taking out their brain and giving it to their girl.
Yeah.
And hip hop back then was serious in the media. They didn't understand that they were just getting high and writing crazy raps, for entertainment. Mm-hmm. The media is taking their lyrics seriously, much like we covered with NWA in our previous episode, where they got into a lot of trouble as well. But this is different in the sense of it's not political or anything. He's literally saying, I'm a killer and I'm going to eat your liver. Mm-hmm. And so they got accused of being satanic and things like that. And Kool Keith's like, no, we just get high and write crazy stuff. So it's interesting that what was going on at that time in terms of the media and embracing hip hop.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I definitely, like you said, like it was still pretty fresh at that time. And if you're reporting from the streets and you're a marginalized group and you're telling from that, granted he's talking about, beating someone's brains in or whatever else. But yeah, it's definitely under a microscope.
Yeah, I think a part of it was the media trying. I think the media at that time was trying to find anything they could hold against hip hop to bring it down, because it wasn't wanted in the mainstream. It wasn't welcomed with open arms. There was a lot of pushback and a lot of. It was restricted in a lot of ways. So anything they could find, I'm sure they jumped on it.
Oh, for sure. But yeah, that's for Break North what I got. And for Critical Beatdown, which comes next.
It's the name of the album.
The album title. And I do have a couple of things for this one, but let me guess. Their lyrics are so fierce. They're coming at you with everything they got.
Do you think Kool Keith mentions brains in this one?
I think he does, and that's one of the lines I'm.
What about ducks and germs?
I think duck. I'm gonna take a gamble on. I'm gonna say ducks is brought up and not germs.
All right. I don't know the answer to that, but it's a good question.
Oh, you know what? Right here. Up and down, sideways, any way I can. Be rude to you, but I'll rap and be crude to you. And eat up toy ducks.
Toy ducks.
But one of the lines that I did like, going off of the whole brains thing, was where did it go? Oh yeah. Pay close attention. I take your brain to another dimension. Hold it, mold it, shape it. You got a knife. Yes, I want to scrape it. I don't know. I mean, I think that's very descriptive, but I like the imagery of, like, in terms of getting into someone's head, like whether if you're playing sports and you really want to really intimidate someone. Mm-hmm. So just that descriptiveness of, like, yeah, man, I'm not only going to do this to your brain, but I'm going to get every last drop that's in there and scrape it out. Like, I'm dominating you. I'm having my way with this and I'm doing it. And so, I think in terms of being competitive, I think that's, you're letting people know what your business is about.
Right. Yeah.
And any argument towards a critical beatdown, I get it, because you're going all in.
Yeah. They're definitely and they talk a little bit about weed in this one, which is a little bit different. I think this is the only song where they mention smoking weed. They say roll the cess, the Buddha with the ganji, puff up while I make tough stuff up. I'm Kool Keith, cold ripping MCs. I'm hyped for the critical beatdown. So he says it in his rhymes, like, "Hey, I'm just smoking weed and writing crazy shit. Like, don't take it too seriously."
Yeah.
I'm just trying to beat down on MCs figuratively through my raps.
When I Burn.
Which number 14.
Number 14. Almost through it.
Yeah, this one's another one where it's a little bit more upbeat and it's faster flows. Not my favorite. I like the more, not the chilled beats, more laid back beats that have slower flows. I think they do better in. But yeah, it's just Cool Keith going for 2 verses, talking shit.
Crashing your brain, changing ways, sore for days, figuring out.
Yeah.
To just attacking people, going for the head. I guess that part too competitively is interesting because like if you're in the UFC, if you're in boxing, like you want to go for the head. If you're 1997, you're Hercules fighting the serpent thing, you don't want to go for the head. That's a lie. Sorry. You don't want to go for the head. Bad example. But I mean, yeah, you want to go for the head in other competitors.
Pretty much any video game ever, when you fight the boss, you want to go for the head.
Usually. But yeah, it's just kind of like that when I'm burning through people.
Yeah.
When I'm burning this.
It's whatever. I think they could have trimmed that one out. And then we end with Said G, Delta Force 1, and this is a solo Said G song. What's really dope, the sample that's using this is called Nautilus, and it's been sampled many times after this in hip-hop. It's a really dope sample. It's one of my favorites. So I was really into this beat. And then Said G, he ends the album off aggressively with his flow and talking his shit, which I think it's a cool way to end the album. He says, "My rhyme's a slingshot, and yes, they triumph over the weak minds who claim they giants. I'm more defiant while you're relying." So he's just talking his shit to end the album, letting him know that once again, they're MCs not to be reckoned with.
Yeah, they're blowing up your brain. Techniques astonishing, just like the end does. My rhymes are polishing. So another head reference. But yeah, he's just talking his thing. He's a champion. He's a champion. He's a champion to kind of end the track off, and that ultimately ends the album too.
Yep.
But yeah.
So that's the Critical Beatdown by the Ultramagetic MCs.
So, thoughts?
I was glad that this album came up to listen to where Cool Keith started. Because I am such a big Cool Keith fan, it's nice to know where he was at the beginning and the type of music he was making and where he's gone from this to where he went with all he literally quadrupled down on the weird, crazy lyrics after this in his solo career, which I love. He didn't try to sell out. He didn't try to, be like other more popular MCs at the time, where he could have been like MC Hammer or LL Cool J or whatever, who was popping at the time. He did his own thing and went in a completely different direction that no one in hip hop had gone before. So seeing this, where you could see those instances where he was already planting those seeds of doing crazy shit and writing about crazy shit. So for me, it was really cool to go back and see that.
I feel that. I liked it for the foundational piece. Like for me, as I've said, like this pod has been really cool for me to take the time to listen to people that I've grown up hearing about, that I've heard the name thrown here and there. I've probably heard some of their music, but couldn't put the name to it. So to actually like have a compartment in my head to say like, I've listened to Cool Keith, this is what my experience is with him, and to kind of see what has been built off of his work. So it was an interesting listen, and especially like listening to something from the 80s and just seeing the huge differences between modern music and old from the jump kind of music.
Right. Yeah.
So I mean, but like I said, I respect it. I really like his flow. I think that's pretty cool, especially for the 80s, because I feel like people weren't really doing that well until like the beginning of the 90s. It was very like choppy back then.
I would say Rakim was rapping really well at this time.
I'm not saying there aren't people out there.
Yeah, but in general, yeah.
Yeah, it was just more prominent like a decade later. And so I definitely appreciated that. It made it an easier album to listen to. The only downside, as I've kind of made my argument throughout this pod, is that it's 15 tracks of the same concept.
Right.
And so it's just really hard.
Yeah. You could see the potential.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If they brought in other concepts, or they turned it into a concept album where it wasn't just talking shit, but it was, they had other subjects and some underlying messages. Like, wow, this is amazing. Because the beats are amazing. The rhymes are great. Their abilities are great.
Yeah, the talent is totally there. It's just the content. So
yeah, it's redundant, and I think it's hard. Like at the beginning of the podcast, I said, we got to try and look at it the eyes of being made in the --
Oh yeah, totally.
But it's hard for us to wrap our brains around that when we've grown up we've had all this hip hop since then to listen to. And seeing where it is now, it's hard to go back and not be like, oh, they could have done this better, or they could have brought in this, and I think with that lens.
Yeah, and I think that it's still on point, because the first example that comes to mind is The Mandalorian. Season 2. I won't spoil anything for you guys out there that haven't seen it yet, but like for a couple episodes, it's like, okay, Mando's gonna go to this planet. He's gonna help these people out. They're gonna figure it out, and then it's just for 3 to 4 episodes. That's what was happening. And so, despite the visuals and the scenes that are happening and the way that they're carrying out these fight sequences, or like I said, the imagery, the graphics, like it all looks great, but it's just recycling the same thing every time. As you said, it's redundant, and it's like, I'm not, as great as the show looks, I'm not just going to keep watching it. This is what's going to happen. Same with this. And I would like to say, no matter across what decade you want to put it, if they're talking about the same thing throughout the entire album and there's nothing else to like do it, even a feature. So they don't even have features in this album. So it's not even someone else coming in and talking about the same thing. It's just, yeah.
Right.
So I'm just like, it is what it is. But the talent's there. The flows are there.
No, it's cool. I'm glad I listened to it. I don't know how often I'm going to revisit this. I do have a golden era hip hop playlist. I definitely added some songs from this to that. Because if you're just playing a playlist and one of these comes on, it fits perfectly into that.
Oh, totally.
And if I'm in the mood for 80s hip hop, this is a great album. But I'm not always in the mood for that.
Yeah, and I noticed from a lot of 80s albums, like there's some that we've covered that are really good start to finish, but definitely, even if you don't like the whole thing, you can plug and play anywhere on that list. If you have a live list, you can take things out from that same album and add different ones from that album back into it. So I do like that.
Yeah. Sweet. Yeah, that's our thoughts on Critical Beatdown. Definitely want to thank all of our listeners out there, whether you're on Google, Stitcher, Amazon, Spotify, Apple. Thank you for following us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. It's at Rap Thought Podcast. Definitely hit us up if you have any albums you want us to put on the list. Can't promise that it'll come up anytime soon, but eventually. And then, in year 5, your album might come up.
We'll try and get to it sooner than that. We can at least do that.
But yeah, thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, you guys have a great week.